My name is Cormarmac, and on the day I got married, my father stood up in front of everyone, my bride, my friends, my grandmother, and said I didn't deserve to be called his son. He called me a bastard, right into the microphone. No shame, no hesitation. Just a single word that shattered the silence and yanked 30 years of pain right to the surface. But the part that no one, not even me, expected was what happened next. Because just minutes later, my grandmother, a quiet woman in her 80s, stood up, walked to the same stage, and revealed something that would destroy not just his authority, but everything he thought he knew about his own family. But before I tell you what happened that day, I need to take you back to where it all began. Back to the White House on St. Catherine Street. Back to Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Lewisburg looks like the kind of town that belongs on postcards. Tree-lined streets, wooden porches with rocking chairs, front lawns that always seem freshly mowed, even in winter. To outsiders, it feels safe, predictable, almost too perfect. But not every house in Lewisburg holds the same kind of peace. Ours was the one at the end of the street, painted pristine white with navy shutters. The porch wrapped in American flags every July. People used to say we were the model family, a successful father, a gracious stepmother, and 2 sons, one bright and lively, the other, well, mostly invisible. That invisible one, that was me. From the moment I could string thoughts together, I knew I was different. Not different in the special kind of way teachers sugarcoat for struggling kids. No. I mean different like I didn't belong. Like someone had made a mistake by putting me here, and everyone around me knew it. Me knew. My earliest memory, I was maybe 4. I spilled a glass of water on the kitchen table. My stepmother Sandra looked at me, jaw tight, and hissed, "Ungrateful little freeloader," before smacking the back of my head so hard my ears rang. She didn't yell in front of guests. Of course, no. Sandra knew how to smile wide for the church potlucks and bake perfect pies for the PTA. But the second that front door closed, it was like her voice changed octaves, like I was a stray animal dragging dirt into her beautiful, polished home. My father, Edmund, wasn't cruel in the way Sandra was. He never raised a hand to me. He didn't have to. His silence was enough. He'd walk past me in the hallway like I wasn't even standing there. Like the air took up more space than I did. Once, when I was 8, I accidentally knocked over a vase while dusting one of Sandra's prized antiques. It shattered on the floor like my lungs had cracked with it. She screamed, grabbed my arm, and dragged me across the room, calling me a monster. Edmund stepped into the doorway, looked at the broken glass, at me huddled on the floor, and just shook his head. He walked away. I remember whispering to myself that night, in bed with the lights off, maybe if I disappear, they'll finally be happy. But I didn't disappear. I stayed, year after year, watching, surviving. There was one person who kept me anchored to the world, though. Her name was Agnes. My grandmother. My mother's mother. Every weekend, when Sandra and Edmund wanted a break or had parties to attend, I was dropped off at her tiny farm on the outskirts of town. To me, that farm was more than a place. It was a pulse. It was safety. Agnes would greet me at the screen door in her flour-dusted apron, arms outstretched. Her hug was the only real warmth I ever knew as a kid. We'd sit at her chipped kitchen table and eat thick slices of apple pie, talk about books, or just listen to the chickens pecking at the dirt outside. And every night, she'd light this old brass lamp in the kitchen. The flame inside glowed orange, dancing just enough to make the shadows move across the wall like stories. I called it the heart of the house. To this day, I still remember the way that light flickered across her lined face as she sat knitting in her favorite chair. It was the only place I felt like a real person. One day when I was 12, we sat on her back porch, watching the wind rustle the tall grass behind the chicken coop. I asked her about my mom, about Rosemary. I'd seen the photos, faded ones with gold curls and a gentle smile, but I didn't remember her. She died when I was 2, or at least that's what they told me. Agnes paused, staring off toward the trees. She was beautiful, she whispered, and strong. But she carried pain, the kind even love couldn't wash away. I asked more, but she shook her head. Her eyes welled up, and for a second, I thought she was about to say something important. But she just reached out, patted my hand, and said, "You'll understand when you're older." But I didn't. I couldn't. All I knew was that the one person who should have held me, who should have stayed, was gone. And I was stuck in a house where the only thing louder than the silence was the sound of being ignored. Then there was Dylan, my half-brother, the golden boy. Same father, different mother. You'd think we were born into separate galaxies. His birthdays were events balloons, mountains of presents, photo shoots in the backyard. Mine, I once got a pencil case from Sandra with a post-it that read, "Be useful this year." When Dylan scraped his knee, Sandra wept and cradled him like he'd been shot. When I broke my arm falling off the garage roof, I had to beg Edmund to drive me to urgent care. I learned to stop asking, stop needing, stop showing. I became quiet, a shadow, just smart enough to stay unnoticed, just obedient enough to avoid the next outburst. But at night, when everyone else slept, I'd open the old hand-me-down laptop my grandmother gave me and write in a hidden app I installed an encrypted journal that no one could ever find. I called it the black box, because if everything else went up in flames, this would be the only place that told the truth. And one night, after Sandra called me a burden on this family, I typed, "If one day I disappear, they'll probably be relieved. Except maybe Grandma. She's the only one who sees me, the only one who makes me believe I exist." I turned 18 on a Tuesday. There was no cake, no happy birthday text, but I didn't care. I hadn't expected anything. Except that evening, my phone rang. It was Grandma. Her voice was trembling. "Cor Marmac," she said, "come to the farm tomorrow. I have something I need to tell you." Something in her tone made my chest tighten. She sounded different. Not just old. Not just tired. But heavy. Like she'd been holding something for years, and it was finally ready to crack open. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it could be. Was she sick? Was she dying? I opened the black box and typed, "Tomorrow. I might lose the only person who ever loved me. Or I might find out why my whole life has felt like someone else's mistake." And that next morning, I got on my bike, rode through the October wind, the cornfields swaying like ghosts on either side of the road. And I had no idea that what Grandma was about to tell me would change everything I thought I knew about my family. The road to my grandmother's farm was the same as always worn gravel. Leaning fences, rust-colored cornfields swaying in the October wind. But that morning, everything felt different, like the ground was holding its breath. I rode fast, my fingers numb on the handlebars, the cold air slicing into my jacket. Agnes hadn't said much on the phone, but the tremble in her voice haunted me all night. I wasn't sure what scared me more, what she might say, or what she might not. When I reached the edge of the property, the scent hit me first. That familiar mix of dry hay, fireplace smoke, and warm apples. It should have comforted me, but instead, it made my stomach twist. The farmhouse looked the same, peeling white paint, sagging porch, rocking chairs swaying ever so slightly in the wind, like someone had just left it. I parked my bike and stepped onto the porch. The wooden boards creaked under my sneakers, the same way they had for years. Then I saw her. Agnes was sitting in her old armchair by the fireplace inside, wrapped in a thick knitted shawl. Her hands were resting on something in her lap, a small, wooden box I'd never seen before. She wasn't knitting. She wasn't humming. She was staring at the flames, her eyes glassy and red-rimmed. That's when I knew this wasn't a casual visit. This was something else. I hesitated at the door. My fingers hovered over the knob. For a second, I thought about walking away. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I opened it anyway. The hinges groaned like a warning. She turned slowly and gave me the kind of smile that felt more like a goodbye than a welcome. "Come in, sweetheart," she said softly. "Sit with me." I stepped into the warmth and sat across from her, the fire popping quietly between us. "Happy birthday," she whispered. 18. A man now. I gave a small nod. "Thanks, Grandma." There was a silence between us longer than usual. Then, without looking at me, she said, "There's something I've kept from you. For a long time." My heart kicked up in my chest. She placed the wooden box on the coffee table and gently opened the lid. Inside were old photographs, some folded letters, and a thin stack of documents, yellowed at the edges. She pulled out a photo and handed it to me. It was a woman with golden hair and soft brown eyes. My mother, Rosemary. She looked young, radiant, and yet there was something sad in her smile, something unfinished. Standing beside her in the picture was a man I didn't recognize. Tall, dark hair, gentle expression. His hand rested lightly on her waist, like he was holding something precious. "This," she said, her voice trembling, "is Caleb. He was your mother's first love, and your biological father." I blinked. "Wait. What?" I stared at the photo, my mind clawing for logic, for oxygen. "I don't understand," I whispered. She reached across the table, took my hand. "Cormac, Edmund is not your father. Caleb is... He worked at the lumber mill outside town. He was poor, yes. But he loved Rosemary with all his heart." My breath caught in my throat. "But Edmund raised me. He... No." She cut in gently. "He tolerated you. That's different." The words landed like stones in my stomach. She went on, slowly, like it hurt to remember. "I was wrong." She said, "Back then, I believed a man's worth was tied to his bank account. I told Rosemary that Caleb would never give her a stable future. I pushed her to marry Edmund. He had status, money, and a name. She closed her eyes, like the shame was still fresh. I forced my daughter into a loveless marriage, she whispered, and she paid the price for it. The fire crackled. My own breath sounded too loud in my ears. She got pregnant with you before the wedding. Agnes continued. Edmund knew. But he went through with it anyway. Maybe for appearances. Maybe because he thought he could grow to love her. But he never did. And he never accepted you. I dropped my head into my hands. It all made sense. Every sideways glance, every cold silence, every time he called me bastard. He wasn't just being cruel, he was being honest. And Sandra, maybe she'd known too. Maybe that's why she treated me like the living proof of someone else's sin. Agnes reached into the box again and pulled out a letter. It was crinkled at the corners, written in delicate cursive. She wrote this the week before she died. She said, I never showed it to you. I didn't think you were ready. I took the letter, my hands shaking, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. Not yet. She was sick, Corm, Agnes said. Lonely, trapped. The kind of trapped no one sees. One night, she took too many pills, and just like that, she was gone. I stared at the letter in my hands. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too numb. Too many pieces of the puzzle were crashing together at once. The mother I never knew. The father I never had. The man who raised me, who hated me, who now had a reason. And in the middle of all of it, Agnes, I'm sorry, she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. I thought I was protecting you. I thought you'd have a better life in that house. I looked up at her. I don't blame you, I said softly. You were the only one who ever really loved me. She reached over, took my hand again. I can't undo the past, sweetheart. But I can give you the truth. And I hope it sets you free. Later that night, after I'd gone back to the attic bedroom upstairs, the one where I used to spend weekends playing with puzzle pieces and reading under that old brass lamp, I finally opened my laptop. The black box. I typed. I used to think I didn't belong because I was broken. Turns out, I didn't belong because I was never theirs to begin with. I stared at the screen, then down at the photo still tucked into my jacket pocket. My mother, Caleb. I felt like I was looking into a mirror I'd never known existed. But I didn't feel peace. I felt fire. Because now I knew why I'd been treated like an intruder in my own home. And I also knew I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. The next morning, before heading back to town, I stood at the edge of the farm and looked out over the frost-covered fields. My breath clouded in the cold. Then I pulled out a small, crumpled envelope from my jacket pocket. A letter I'd written last night, but never meant to send. It was addressed to the house on St. Catherine Street. Inside was one line. I'm done trying to earn love from people who were never capable of giving it. I dropped it into the mailbox and turned away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking toward survival. I was walking toward freedom. The morning after I left Agnes's farm, something in me had changed. It wasn't just that I'd learned who my real father was, or that my entire childhood had been built on a lie. It was that for the first time, I no longer felt the need to belong in that house. I didn't need Edmund's acknowledgement. I didn't want Sandra's approval. What I wanted was out. I pedaled back toward town through the brittle cold of October. Wind slapping against my cheeks, my backpack bouncing behind me. The envelope I dropped into their mailbox hours earlier was gone when I passed by, taken, read, maybe burned. I didn't care. But as I walked through the front door of that house one last time, I knew I had to play it smart. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to throw a fit. I wasn't going to give them any more of my pain. I was going to leave, with dignity, and they were going to feel it. I waited until after dinner. Sandra had already retreated upstairs with her glass of Chardonnay. Edmund was reading the paper like it was still 1955, and Dylan was in the living room, half watching a football game on mute while scrolling on his phone. I walked past them silently, up to my room, and began packing. The room was more storage closet than bedroom. No posters, no trophies, no signs that a teenager had ever lived there. Just a mattress on a metal frame, a tiny desk with one drawer, and the battered laptop that held my digital journal. The black box. I grabbed my backpack and slowly folded the photo of my mom and Caleb into the front zipper pouch. Right next to my journal and an old pair of fingerless gloves Agnes had knitted for me years ago. I left the lamp on. Maybe I wanted someone to notice. Maybe I didn't. But just as I zipped the bag shut and slung it over my shoulder, the door burst open. Sandra. Hair perfectly curled, lipstick untouched. But her eyes ice. "You think you're going somewhere," she snapped. I turned to face her. Calm, clear. "Yes," I said. "I'm leaving. Tonight." Her lip curled. "You ungrateful little parasite." She took a step closer, lowering her voice like venom through a straw. "We fed you, housed you, and now you're going to run off like some victim play the poor. Misunderstood bastard." I didn't flinch. I didn't yell. I just said, "I'm not playing anything. I'm done." That was when she slapped me. Hard, but not just physically. Something in the slap was meant to reclaim control. It was like she wanted to drag me back into being a scared 10-year-old. But it didn't work. I stood up straighter, looked her in the eye. "I know the truth now," I said quietly. "About my mother. About Caleb. About Edmund." Her face twitched. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she hissed. I stepped past her. "I think I do." I walked down the stairs with my backpack. Edmund didn't even look up from his paper. Dylan barely blinked. And maybe that was the cruelest part, how easy it was for them to let me go. No one asked where I was going. No one stopped me. The moment I stepped outside, the cold hit harder than ever. But I was finally breathing. I spent that night on the floor of Agnes's living room, wrapped in an old quilt, watching shadows flicker from the brass lamp by the window. She didn't ask questions, just made me tea, left me space, and sat nearby knitting like she always had. That light, soft, flickering, golden was the only warmth I needed. The next morning, I caught the 6:15 a.m. Greyhound to Pittsburgh. I didn't know where I was going to live. I hadn't been accepted to college yet. I had no money saved. But I knew one thing. I was never going back. The next few months were the hardest I've ever known. I applied to community college programs from library computers, slept on couches or shared rooms with students I met through temp jobs, took every under-the-table gig I could find: dishwashing, janitorial work, even handing out flyers in the freezing cold downtown. At night, I kept writing in the black box. I'm not angry anymore, just tired. But tired is better than numb. And at least now I know who I am. Eventually, I got accepted into a state college with a strong computer science program. Financial aid covered tuition, but not much else. So I picked up extra shifts waiting tables at night, tutoring intro to programming students on weekends, delivering food at 2 a.m. to drunk frat guys who tipped in quarters. I slept 3, maybe 4 hours a night, ate peanut butter on old bagels, wore the same 2 hoodies until they pilled to dust. But I didn't quit. Because every time I felt like breaking, every time my body ached from exhaustion or my pride got bruised by some entitled customer, I would open my journal and read the line my mother once wrote. Some pain is the cost of surviving a world that doesn't make space for you. And then I'd keep going. There was one night, deep winter. Pittsburgh frozen over where I hit my limit. I'd just finished a closing shift at the diner, walked home through the snow, only to find that my roommate had locked me out accidentally. I sat on the stoop in the cold, fingers stiff, jeans soaked, waiting for someone to come back. And for a moment, I almost let it break me. But then I pulled out my phone, opened the black box, and typed, "If survival is all I've known, maybe that's enough for now. But one day, I won't just survive. I'll live. Fully, loudly, in the sunlight." That sunlight came slowly. A professor noticed my work and connected me to an internship that turned into a part-time job, then full-time. I moved into a small studio with a real bed and a desk that didn't wobble. I saved every penny. And the whole time through all of it, Agnes kept writing me letters, real ones, on cream-colored paper with her shaky handwriting. She'd slip in $20 bills sometimes, a pair of mittens she knitted herself, photos of the farm. One letter read, "You're doing what neither your mother nor I had the courage to do. You're breaking the cycle. I'm proud of you, Corm." That letter, I framed it. It hangs on the wall of my apartment to this day. Then, just when life started to feel steady, I met her. It was a rainy afternoon, coffee shop near campus. I was buried in code, headphones in, half living off caffeine and frustration. She walked in like she belonged to the light, even though she was soaked from the rain. Her name was Diana. And from the moment she smiled at the barista, just a soft, kind smile that wasn't for show, I felt something I hadn't in years. Curiosity. But that's another chapter. Right now, what matters is this. I left Lewisburg with nothing. No money, no family, no name anyone respected. But I had one thing, a reason. And sometimes, that's enough. I know what you're thinking. Did Sandra really just let him leave like that? Did Edmund just stay silent? Here's what I didn't know then: Sandra wasn't finished. She wasn't used to losing, especially not to someone she considered disposable. And just when I started to build something real, something hopeful, she would come back, not with fists, but with something worse. It was a Wednesday. Cold, bright. The kind of Pittsburgh morning where the air stings your face, but the sky is clear like glass. I had just gotten off a 5 a.m. delivery shift and was standing outside my tiny apartment with a bag of dollar store groceries and a mind full of code. I was building a side project, my own mobile app, to track local job shifts, and somewhere in between exhaustion and ambition, I had stopped feeling my own hunger. That's when I saw her. Diana, or rather she saw me. I was leaning against the rusted mailbox in front of my building, eyes half closed, trying to remember if I had milk in the fridge, when a soft voice said, "Excuse me, are you okay?" I turned. She was standing there, damp hair clinging to her cheeks, coffee in one hand, umbrella in the other. She looked like she had stepped out of a different city, clean, composed, and completely unbothered by the chaos of Pittsburgh traffic behind her. "I'm fine," I muttered. "Just thinking." She smiled, Looks like you're thinking in lowercase letters. I blinked. Sorry, I asked. She tilted her head, amused. You know, lowercase quiet, soft, a little tired. I laughed. Not because it was hilarious, but because I couldn't remember the last time someone said something so gentle. That's how it began. A strange, accidental moment on a sidewalk. Two people from different worlds bumping into each other like misplaced punctuation. Diana was a freelance journalist, working for a local culture site that paid more in compliments than cash. She was used to living lean, which made our first few conversations easier. She understood ramen for dinner. She understood secondhand clothes, library Wi-Fi, and late rent. But more than that, she listened. Really listened. Not in the way therapists nod. In the way that made you feel like your words had weight. We started meeting once a week at a quiet coffee shop 2 blocks from my place. She'd bring a notepad. I'd bring my laptop. We'd work side by side, barely speaking for hours. And yet those hours felt like breathing for the first time. Then came the day she asked, "What's your family like, Cormy?" The question froze me mid-keystroke. For a moment, I thought about dodging, telling her about Agnes, skipping everything else. But something about her gaze warm, curious, unafraid made me open the black box instead. That night, I invited her to my apartment. We sat on the floor, a bowl of microwave popcorn between us, the sound of the radiator clicking in the background. I took out the photo. My mother, Rosemary, Caleb, their shy, fragile happiness captured in faded color. I told her everything. About Edmund's coldness, Sandra's cruelty, Dylan's golden boy halo, the nights I typed into a secret journal because no one else saw me. I told her about the farm, the brass lamp, the letter my mother left behind. And the moment Agnes told me the truth, Diana didn't speak for a long time after. Then she reached across the rug and held my hand. "You're not your pain," she said. "You're what you've done with it." It was the first time anyone had said that out loud, and I believed her. From there, things moved gently. We started sharing our dreams. Her dream was to publish a book, real stories from real people who were invisible to the world. Mine, I just wanted a life that was mine. One where no one could take away my joy or tell me I didn't deserve it. After 2 years together, I proposed. I wasn't romantic by traditional standards. No fireworks, no roses. Just a ring I bought with 4 months of saved tips and a sunset by the Allegheny River. "Diana," I said, voice shaking, "will you write the rest of this story with me?" She cried, said yes, laughed through the tears. And that was the beginning of something beautiful. The wedding was small, intimate, held at a riverside cafe with candles on the tables and Agnes seated in the front row, wrapped in a shawl I'd bought her from a downtown thrift shop. I had spent weeks preparing, not just the seating chart or the playlist, but preparing emotionally. Because I had done something risky. I had invited them. Edmund, Sandra, even Dylan. Not because I wanted closure, not because I needed them there, but because I wanted them to see what I had built without them. Because when you grow up starving for love, sometimes the final act of healing is choosing to stop chasing it. They came. Of course they did. Edmund arrived in a pressed suit, gray streaks in his hair, still walking like his spine was made of iron. Sandra clung to his arm, her makeup precise, her smile tighter than I'd ever seen. Dylan looked older, less smug, more tired. They took their seats near the back. Didn't say hello, didn't say anything. But I noticed their eyes scanning the room, watching, calculating. I stayed focused on Diana, on Agnes, on the warmth. The ceremony began. Music played. We said our vows under golden light. It was everything I had ever wanted, until it wasn't. The MC stood up for toasts. He introduced me first. I thanked Diana for her love. I thanked Agnes for her strength. I spoke about rebuilding, about rising from silence. People clapped. A few wiped tears. Then, the MC made a mistake. He smiled and said, "Now, let's hear from the groom's father." I froze. Diana squeezed my hand. Agnes tensed. Edmund stood, his expression unreadable. He walked to the mic slowly. No paper, no notes. He looked around the room, smiled thinly, and then he said it. "I'm afraid I have no congratulations to offer." The room shifted. Chairs creaked. A guest coughed. "I have no gift," Edmund said, "because I am not this man's father. He is a bastard, and always has been." Gasps, hands to mouths. A woman dropped her wine glass. I didn't move. I couldn't. It was happening again. Just like when I was 10 or 16, or every birthday I sat through invisible. But this time I wasn't alone. Agnes stood up. Slow, steady. She walked to the front, pulled out an old cloth bag, and what she pulled out next would burn the whole room down. Agnes stepped forward. She didn't walk fast, and she didn't raise her voice. But somehow, the way she moved slow, steady, every step deliberate, commanded the room more than any outburst ever could. She stood right where Edmund had just dropped his bomb, beside the mic he'd poisoned, and in her hands was an old cloth bag, frayed at the edges, faded green, the kind of thing you'd overlook at a flea market, or find tucked behind old recipe cards and forgotten bills. But tonight, it carried something heavy, something that would turn the night inside out. Agnes glanced briefly at me, then at Diana, then let her gaze land squarely on Edmund. "If we're sharing truths tonight," she said quietly, "then I have one of my own." The guests sat frozen. You could feel the confusion, the electricity. Like everyone knew something was coming. But no one knew what. Agnes reached into the bag and pulled out a manila folder. She placed it gently on the table next to the mic. "This is a DNA test," she said, "conducted 3 years ago." Edmund's face twitched. Sandra sat forward slightly. Still, but her knuckles whitened on the edge of the table. Agnes continued, her voice steady as glass. "It proves that Dylan is not your son." Gasps, not just from guests, real, raw ones. The kind people can't fake. The kind that rattle the air. Edmund blinked. Once, twice, as if the words hadn't registered yet. But Sandra, she broke. "No," she said sharply, rising from her seat. "This is ridiculous. You're making this up. This is a wedding, for God's sake." Agnes didn't flinch. She reached into the bag again, pulling out photographs, letters, receipts. She laid them out like puzzle pieces, one by one. Images of Sandra, years ago, in restaurants outside of town, in hotel lobbies, in parking lots. Always with the same man, always close, too close. Letters between them handwritten, with dates and names. Receipts for gifts, a bank transfer to a private account. And then, a final page. Agnes held it up. A signed affidavit from a private investigator. A DNA match confirming Dylan was the biological child of Sandra. And someone else entirely. "I've waited too long to say this," Agnes said, her voice shaking now. "But I can't let you keep hurting my grandson and calling him names, while your entire marriage was built on a lie." Edmund staggered slightly. He tried to speak, but no words came. Then his knees gave out. Someone screamed. A guest lunged forward to catch him before he hit the ground. Chairs screeched. A woman spilled her wine across the floor as she rushed to dial 911. Edmund collapsed beside the podium. Sandra stood frozen, face pale, lips parted but silent. For once, there was no script, no mask. And Dylan didn't speak. He stood slowly, looked at the documents, then at Sandra, then at me. And I'll never forget the way his expression shifted, not in anger, not in defense, but in something close to shame. He turned, gently took Sandra's wrist. "We should go," he whispered. And they walked out. No screaming, no goodbye. They just left. But every eye followed them, and every guest remembered who walked out and who stayed standing. The ambulance came fast. They wheeled Edmund out on a stretcher, an oxygen mask on his face, his right hand limp by his side. Someone said it might be a stroke. Someone else whispered about karma. I didn't move. Diana gripped my hand the whole time. And Agnes, she sat back down, quiet, wrinkled, frail, but stronger than any woman I've ever known. The MC tried to recover, but the ceremony was already something else now. No longer just a wedding. It had become a reckoning. After the cake was sliced and the guests started trickling out, some teary-eyed, others shaken, Diana and I sat with Agnes in a side room. The three of us. No music, no speeches, just silence and the faint scent of wax from the candle centerpieces. I turned to her. "Why now?" I asked softly. "Why all of that tonight?" She looked at me with those tired eyes. "Because he said it," she replied. "He called you that word, again, after everything, in front of everyone." And I realized, if I stayed quiet one more time, I'd be no better than him. She touched the edge of the folder with one trembling finger. "I didn't gather that evidence for revenge. I kept it in case you ever needed it. But I hoped maybe we'd never have to open it." Her voice cracked. "I just wanted you to live free, not haunted." But when he used that word again, I knew he hadn't changed. Not one bit. That night, when we got home to the little apartment Diana and I rented near Bloomfield, I laid the old cloth bag on the dining table and stared at it. So much pain, so much truth, all carried by a woman who baked pies and knitted scarves, and silently protected me when no one else did. Diana placed a hand on my shoulder. "She did that for you," she said, "so you wouldn't have to carry it anymore." I nodded, and for the first time since I was a child, I cried without holding back. We convinced Agnes to stay with us for a few weeks after the wedding, just until things settled. She was hesitant at first. "You two need your space," she'd said. But Diana just smiled. "You're family, and you're not going anywhere alone." We set up the guest room with her favorite armchair, a warm quilt, and a little bookshelf stocked with classics she loved. And in the living room above the mantel, I hung a framed photograph of my mother and Caleb. Right beside it, I placed the brass lamp from the farm, the one that had flickered through my childhood like a small promise that someday there would be light. But even with the truth out, something still lingered, a question I couldn't shake. How did she get it all? How did Agnes uncover a secret that had been buried for decades? And why did she wait so long? One evening, after Diana had gone to bed, I made 2 cups of tea and sat across from Agnes in the living room. The lamp glowed between us, and I finally asked her, "Grandma," I said gently, "how did you know about Sandra? About Dylan? The tests? The photos?" She smiled, a slow, tired smile. "You really want to know?" I nodded, and she told me everything. Agnes held the cup of tea gently in her wrinkled hands. Her fingers curled around it like it was the last source of warmth in the world. The brass lamp glowed between us, casting long, soft shadows on the walls of our living room. I waited quietly, watching her eyes, the ones that had seen more than anyone ever gave her credit for. "You really want to know how I found out?" she asked again. Softly, I nodded. She took a slow sip, then looked down at the steam swirling above her mug, like she was watching a memory form right in front of her. "It started with a coincidence," she said. "Years earlier, maybe 4 or 5, Agnes had gone into town to meet an old friend for lunch at a little roadside diner. It was the kind of place with checkered floors and sugar packets stuck together with syrup. They were finishing their pie when Agnes spotted Sandra, sitting in a corner booth, holding hands with a man who wasn't Edmund. They were laughing, whispering, his hand on her knee like it belonged there. Agnes froze. At first, she told herself it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe he was a cousin, maybe a friend, but something didn't sit right. Not with how Sandra leaned in like a high school girl, or how she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when he looked at her. "I'd always known she had a mean streak," Agnes said, her voice quiet. "But that day, I realized something else. She wasn't just cruel. She was hiding something. Agnes didn't have money for lawyers or fancy detectives. But she had something better, an old friend named Henry, a retired private investigator. Used to work missing persons in Harrisburg, years ago. He'd helped Agnes find a runaway niece. He owed her a favor, so she called him. I didn't ask him to spy," she said. "I just told him I had a suspicion, and I needed clarity. For your sake." Henry didn't hesitate. Within 2 months, he had a folder full of photos. Sandra, the same man, multiple times, different locations. Hotel lobbies, restaurants, a cabin just outside of Lock Haven. She was careful, Agnes said, but not careful enough. Then came the real risk. Getting a DNA sample. It was Henry's idea. She said, he knew a woman who worked in school admin. One afternoon, when Dylan left behind his retainer case during a school visit, she swiped the used one and handed it off. She paused. "Do you know what it felt like?" "Corm," she asked, her voice suddenly sharp. "To test your own grandson's DNA, to ask a man to prove the child you helped raise? Wasn't really family." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I prayed I was wrong. She whispered, "I wanted Dylan to be Edmund's son. Because if he wasn't, that meant you had been treated like garbage while the real betrayal was under their roof all along." Her voice broke then. But I wasn't wrong. She handed me the original test result that night, folded neatly, already yellowing at the corners. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. I just stared at her and realized that while I had been surviving college, grief, identity, Agnes had been doing something far lonelier. She'd been watching from the sidelines, carrying a secret that could destroy a family. But she'd waited. for the right time. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I asked, my voice rough. She looked at me. Because you were still healing, she said. And I didn't want you to live in rage. I wanted you to live in truth. And that's not the same thing. After that night, everything changed. The house we lived in, small as it was, began to feel like a place where things could begin again. Diana planted herbs in the windowsill. Agnes started knitting again, scarves, gloves, even a little sweater for our cat, which she named Pepper because he kept sneezing. Some nights, I'd come home from work and see them both in the kitchen, Agnes stirring soup while Diana recited a list of headlines she was editing. And I'd stand in the doorway, watching them, the way someone watches something sacred and impossibly fragile. I had a family now, not made of blood, but built from choice. News of the wedding fallout spread quickly in Lewisburg. Small towns don't let secrets stay buried, not after they've been exposed in front of a crowd. I never reached out to Edmund. I didn't send flowers when I heard he was home from the hospital, partially paralyzed, barely speaking. I didn't call Dylan, though someone told me he'd left town, moved to Chicago, started over. And Sandra, she became a ghost in her own neighborhood. People stopped inviting her to charity brunches. Her book club dissolved. The woman who used to hold court at every social function now avoided eye contact in grocery store aisles. I didn't celebrate their downfall. I didn't smile when I heard they were suffering. But I did feel something I hadn't in years. Peace. Not the kind you shout about. The quiet kind. The kind that feels like a sunrise after a long winter. One Sunday morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper, typed. It read, "You won. Hope you're proud of yourself." No name. But I knew the handwriting of pain when I saw it. Sandra. I folded the letter and dropped it into the trash. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need her shame. Not anymore. A few weeks later, Diana and I made a decision. We'd sell Agnes's farm, not because we didn't love it, but because we wanted to build something new in Pittsburgh, a place where memories weren't tainted by survival. Agnes didn't protest. In fact, she smiled. I held on to that house for too long, she said. It was time. We used the money to buy a little place on the edge of the city, a 2-story white home with a wraparound porch, a tiny backyard garden, and a study where I could write code while Pepper napped on the windowsill. We moved in the fall, leaves turning gold, air crisp and clean. And on the very first night, we placed 2 things by the fireplace: the photo of my mother and Caleb, and the brass lamp from Agnes's farm. Lit, warm, steady. One evening, I found Diana standing in front of the photo. She turned to me. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "what your mother would think of all this?" I nodded. "All the time. She'd be proud of you." I smiled. "I hope so." Then she tilted her head. "Have you ever read the letter, the one she wrote before she passed?" I hesitated. I hadn't all these years. I'd carried it, kept it tucked in my desk drawer, but I'd never opened it. Not once. "I think I'm ready," I whispered. And that night, I did. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible in places, but the message was clear. "My dearest son, I'm sorry I couldn't be the mother you needed, but you need to know your existence was never a mistake. You were born from love, a love I wasn't allowed to keep. I hope you grow up kind. I hope someone calls you by your name. And I hope one day you find the family I couldn't give you. Love always, Mom." I folded the letter, set it beside the brass lamp, and sat quietly, letting the weight of those words sink in, not as grief, but as release. Then, the doorbell rang. Diana and I exchanged glances. It was nearly 9 p.m. No one ever visited at this hour. I stood, walked to the door, opened it, and standing there on my porch was someone I hadn't seen in years. His hands in his pockets, eyes dark with something unreadable. "Corm," he said. It was Dylan. He stood there on my porch, hands in his coat pockets, framed by the porch light and the faint hum of street lamps. Dylan, older, tired, his hair shorter than I remembered, and his shoulders not quite as square. I hadn't seen him since the wedding, the moment everything broke open. When the truth Agnes revealed flipped both our lives upside down. But now, here he was, unexpected, unannounced. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated. The silence between us stretched like a held breath. Then I stepped aside. "Yeah," I said, "come in." We sat in the living room, Diana hovering near the hallway but giving us space. Pepper curled up near the lamp like he knew something important was happening. Dylan looked around slowly, took in the walls, the bookshelf, the photos. His eyes landed on the framed picture of my mom and Caleb. "You kept that," he said softly. "Always," I replied. He nodded once, then leaned forward, elbows on his knees, like the weight of what he came to say was too heavy to carry upright. I didn't come to argue. He started, or explain, or defend her. He didn't say Sandra's name, just her. I stayed quiet. Let him speak. I left Lewisburg after the wedding. He said, "Moved to Chicago, took a job at a startup, tried to build something new." A faint smile flickered. "But you can't really outrun the mirror, can you?" I tilted my head. "Why now?" He took a breath. "I've been reading your blog." I blinked. "My blog?" He nodded. "The one you've been posting pieces of your journal to. The digital one. You used to call it the black box." I didn't realize he'd found it. I never promoted it. Just left it floating online like a message in a bottle. "You said something in your last post," he continued. "You wrote, 'Some families break you, but some break themselves just to rebuild with you in the center.'" That stuck with me. I swallowed. Dylan leaned back. I think I always knew something was off. About Mom, about Edmund. But I was too comfortable to question it. I didn't want to lose what I had, even if it meant stepping over you. He looked at me, eyes clear for the first time in years. "I'm sorry, Corm. I know that doesn't fix it. But I needed to say it. For a while." We just sat there. The room filled with the low hum of the radiator and the soft tick of the clock over the kitchen doorway. I thought about the years, the birthdays he got presents, and I got silence. The college tours he went on while I scrubbed dishes. The way he called me stepbro with that smug tone that always meant something colder. But I also remembered the rare moments when we were just kids. Playing basketball in the driveway. Arguing over video games. Him sneaking me a slice of pizza when Sandra wasn't looking. It wasn't all cruelty. Sometimes it was just silence. And silence left unchecked can rot. "I appreciate you coming," I said at last. "Really. But I'm not sure what you want me to say." He nodded. "I know. I'm not asking for anything." Then, after a pause, "But I wanted to give you something." He pulled a small envelope from his coat. "I found this after Edmund died." He said, "It was in a locked drawer, addressed to you, but never mailed." I hesitated. "You read it?" He shook his head. "No." I thought about it. But it wasn't mine. He stood. I'll go now. I just needed to say sorry. And thank you. I raised an eyebrow. For what? For showing me it's possible to walk away from a legacy and still be whole. He walked to the door, paused, then turned back. Tell Agnes I said thank you, too. And just like that, he was gone. I stared at the envelope in my hands. My name Cormac, written in Edmund's clean, exact handwriting. I sat down by the brass lamp. Diana joined me silently, placing a hand on my knee, and I opened it. Corm, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this. But if you are, then I need you to know something. I knew. Not everything. Not right away. But I knew Sandra had secrets. I just didn't have the courage to face them. And I let that fear make me cruel to you. It wasn't fair. You didn't deserve what I became. I didn't know how to be a father. And I resented the boy who reminded me that love is something you earn, not something you inherit. I hope you find peace. I hope you build the kind of home I never could. And I hope one day, if you ever have a child of your own, you'll be the father I wasn't. Edmund. I folded the letter slowly. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't ache. Instead, I felt something strange. Not forgiveness, but closure, like a door gently clicking shut behind you. Not slammed, not locked, just closed. Weeks passed. Agnes's health began to fade. She stayed quiet about it. But Diana noticed the changes, the slower steps, the forgotten names, the nights when the lamp flickered and she didn't seem to notice. One morning, I found her journal open on the dining table, a single line written in her delicate script. He found the light. I can go now. 3 weeks later, she passed, peacefully, in her sleep, wrapped in the same quilt she made the year I left Louisburg. We buried her beside my mother, under an oak tree that overlooked the ridge. The day was gray, but the sky didn't cry. It had already rained enough for one life. In the weeks after, Diana and I sat on the porch often, sometimes in silence, sometimes with tea, sometimes with tears. And one afternoon, I pulled out something I'd been working on in secret, a small brown envelope. Inside a thank you card, handwritten, simple, to Agnes for the truth, for the light, for giving me back my name. We placed it under the lamp in our living room. Let it rest there like a second heartbeat. Life moved forward. Diana's book got published, stories of broken families finding their own truth. My app finally got funding. We turned it into a job-matching platform for kids aging out of foster care. Named it The Black Box. It felt right. Like everything I had survived wasn't just pain, it was purpose. And one day, years later, standing in the nursery of our home, rocking our newborn daughter in my arms, I whispered to her, "You're not just loved, you're seen." Diana smiled, watching us. "What's her middle name going to be?" she asked. I looked at our daughter. So small, so soft, so full of everything the world tried to take from me once. "Agnes," I said. She nodded. Perfect. Sometimes I still light the lamp, not because I'm lost, but to remember how far I've come from the dark. Thank you for staying with the story. You never know who needs to hear it. Leave a comment if you've ever had to choose your own family.